Hello, welcome everybody. Appreciate you all taking the time to join today. I'm Josh Hollander. I head up the customer success group here at OneSignal. Many of you have probably worked with members of my team focused on how do you get best practices out of the OneSignal platform and really driving customer engagement. Excited to spend the next 30 minutes or so with you guys today to talk about live activities in today's webinar. So dynamic engagement, best practices for live activities in iOS apps. So let's go ahead and jump in. First, I always think it's important to set the groundwork just to make sure we're all on the same page. And so we'll kick off with what are live activities? And no better way than to take the definition directly from Apple. So interactive notifications on an iPhone that display real-time information from apps at glanceable locations, such as the lock screen, dynamic island, or standby. Hopefully none of those words are foreign to you because you've been dealing with this for a little bit or started researching it. But when done right, live activities are really an opportunity to create utility for your app's users. As a marketer, think of this as an opportunity to brand the screen on an iPhone for 8 hours at a time, or up to 8 hours at a time. What we really want to focus on today, though, during our conversation is how do you do that properly? I'm a movie quote guy, so I'll pull one of those out. But like Uncle Ben said, great powers come with great responsibility. So we're really going to spend some time talking about how to leverage this unique Apple experience to create a better customer experience. And I'll emphasize Apple experience. This is truly unique to Apple. This is something they released a little over a year ago now and have really started to dive in deeper with it. And so we want to give you guys a best case of how do you leverage this unique channel to get the most from your messaging. I will caveat really quickly, Android has a concept of widgets. It's slightly different. We're not going to talk about it today, but if that's something you'd like more information on, definitely follow up with us. We're happy to help you guys get more information there as well. So before we begin, it's probably worth addressing why live activities is worth all the time and consideration. So what can it offer your engagement strategy that you can't get from other channels? So beyond the app engagement, an app doesn't need to be open in order to initiate a live activity. So it's a great channel to go wider and realize, okay, I can put this on the home screen and people are going to be able to see me whether they're actively in my app or doing something else altogether. Creating a stickier experience. So as I've already said, they live on the lock screen of the dynamic island for up to 8 hours. That's a really long time. And so you're going to get a lot of active engagement and even passive engagement where somebody may just glance at their phone to check the time and then it's right there. We do an annual report that we call the State of Customer Engagement. And in the most recent report, we saw that apps that use live activities have a 23.7% higher average 30-day retention rate, and the lifetime value to cost of acquisition cost ratios are significantly better. It's because you are creating utility, you're creating value, and that's something that your users are really looking for in this very fractured, busy world of apps. And so the more you can do to differentiate yourself and provide that value, the more you're going to be able to maintain those users. Frictionless user experience. Like I've said multiple times, and you'll hear multiple more times, it's a continuous real-time update on the lock screen. So customers are constantly informed about what they need to know without having to get multiple notifications. And this is huge. Notifications are very valuable, and it's something we obviously highly recommend, but the more notifications you send, that can create fatigue. And so you're seeing more and more of these really robust live events are using live activities instead of push notifications over and over again, because you're able to get the important information across without having to send that ding all the time. Increased interaction. Users can interact with live activities to expand it, view more details, or go into a more detailed experience when they click through and get to the app. We'll talk about that more to come as well. And then finally, more customized options. Apple has always really kept the iPhone screens locked down. It's been a very controlled experience that Apple maintains. This is the opportunity for you to start to get a bit more creative and really take over some of the space on that screen. And when you do it, you can use rich media, images, animations, interactive buttons, and really just make it an engaging and visually appealing experience. And so that's a great way to think about how do I differentiate and stand out when I'm using live activities compared to my competitors. Again, as we're going through, guys, feel free to throw questions into the chat. We'll definitely leave time at the end to get to those. And I also failed to say we're recording this episode, so we're definitely going to share with everybody afterwards as well. Okay, live activities, best practices. Let's dig in and just talk about how to get live activities right. First, clearly define start and end. So live activities are really suited well for events or tasks that have a clear defined start and end. Think about it in the delivery commerce world. So when you place an order, you see that order is placed, you see when it's delivered. Rideshare, you can see when the car is, how far away it is, how long it will take once you're in the car to get there. Sporting events, clearly defined. Despite what my wife may say when I say there's only 2 minutes left, like Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL, they all have very quick adoption of this platform because it just makes a ton of sense. People want to be able to follow what's happening with the game, even if they're out and about in the world. That said, though, your app doesn't have to fall into just one of the obvious categories. There's examples of live activities that are a little more different. So fitness leaderboards, active Peloton guy over here, and I love using Peloton when I'm out for my walks or if I'm doing an outdoor run of some sort. It's a great way to just stay engaged and really gamify the experience. Gaming apps, we're seeing more and more where the games are trying to promote live events, leaderboards, challenges, and take gamification even further on that home screen so that they can get their players back into the games more often. Travel tracking, you're seeing this with the United, Southwest of the world, where you can see how long do I have on my layover, how long is the actual flight, lots of different ways to look at the data there. Fintech and crypto. This is one where if you're tracking coins specifically or looking at trades and trying to just stay on top of all that, make sure you're getting first mover advantage, it's another great experience. And then there's some multi-purpose countdowns and other unique ones that we're going to talk about here. So we've got a couple visual examples here. Major League Baseball, one of my favorites here on the left-hand side. It's clean. It's very easy to see. At a glance, you know quickly what's the score, where are they, and what's happening. I think Major League Baseball has, for decades, really done a great job of creating that triangle of the bases and made it very clear of what am I looking at. And so they're taking that experience that they've branded for years, putting it onto the phone now for an extended period of time. Here on the right-hand side, you got Flightly. Again, a great example of if you're trying to track someone's flight, whether it's your flight or if you have a loved one that you're picking up from the airport, you always want to be able to keep up with what's happening. So this is a very strong and good use case that helps people get utility, get value. We want to make sure somebody is opting in, partaking, they're getting something from this. That's the value exchange that they expect, and we're going to ultimately help you guys pay off. From there, we've got a couple of the more hey, I wouldn't have guessed that. So one of my favorites is actually this on the left-hand side, Calzi. It's a calculator app. And so as you're jumping between apps, or if you're just going to be doing a lot of calculations, you don't want your screen to go dark if you're using the calculator app. You don't want to have to jump back and forth between apps trying to remember the numbers and enter it again. And so great utility right here. This isn't necessarily a start and end in the sense of an event, but it's still a very valuable use case. Carrot, here in the middle, it's a weather app, so you can use it for storm durations. I'm actually down in the south, so we dealt with all of the hurricane stuff last week. Great to be able to understand kind of where is that weather, how long is it going to last, what kind of conditions can you expect. So once again, providing a utility that's very different from other experiences I can get. And then over here on the right-hand side, Park Mobile. You might not be as familiar with them, but they are parking apps. So think of the way you use Uber and Lyft. Same idea for parking, so being able to find it. And great example to be able to identify, okay, how much time do you have on your actual parking meter? When does it end? What was the exact parking spot? And so great opportunity for them to really differentiate themselves and stand out in that space. So jumping ahead, best practice number 2, this is not ad real estate. Live activities, as I've already said, they need to provide value. There needs to be utility in it for the users. You should not think about this as just a pure monetization or a place to put a whole lot of ads. I like to talk out of both sides of my mouth, so I'm going to talk out of the other side now. If you do include programs, ensure they're intrinsically tied to the event or the task in question. One of the best examples I can think of is FIFA. If you think about World Cup, FIFA, Coke is attached to it. It's just as simple as that. And so if FIFA does a live activity, there's a Coke in the middle of that live activity, that's not going to be offensive. That's something everybody's very used to and expecting. If you have a premier sponsor of the event and it's a very obvious, this is always the sponsor of that event, I don't think there's any problems there. It's when you start trying to put almost like a dynamic ad that's changing, and so you're getting the rotation of ads taking place in it, that's where you're going to really start to create some offensive experiences, and we highly recommend you avoid. I know it seems like a great idea to create some more revenue streams. At the end of the day, though, that's not what we really want to focus on. We want utility, we want value. You can also go a little further, though, and think about it from a gamification perspective. And so I really like what Fitiv is doing here. So you can see the pulse heart rate monitor, but it also has these rings, and it really creates this idea of, hey, how do we get them to use this more? How do we get them to stay engaged? And so they're really making smart use of the space and going, okay, there was a blank space, we needed to do something there. And so they found another way to leverage it for value rather than purely looking at it from a, hey, let's put an ad in there because they are kind of ad sponsored content. Leverage deep linking. So this is not unique to live activities. You should be using this in all of your push notifications, email marketing that you send. A deep link is clear or simply a link that when you click it, it takes you to the exact information that the user is expecting to see. No different in live activities. So in the example we're looking at here, I click on the game for the Grizzlies and the Lakers. I expect to be taken to the page specific to the Grizzlies and the Lakers. So I can dive deeper. I want to see how many rebounds. I want to see how many shots have been taken. I want to see all that information that's associated to the game. I do not want a disjointed experience where you take me to the home page. I have to navigate, find the game, click deeper to be able to get those stats. And so when you're creating the live activity experience, part of that experience is really making sure if somebody doesn't want just a glanceful, wants to go deeper, you make it easy for them and you provide that to them without them having to do any sort of digging or really kind of going further than they need to. Okay, now when to use live activities versus push notifications. So although both deliver critical information to users' home screens, live activities and push notifications actually have very distinct differences in their use cases. So push notifications are perfect for sending one-off messages over time. Think of this as a series of reminders sent to new users who download your app and really start to go through that onboarding process. You're trying to create a habit and help them understand what is the use of this app and why should you be coming back to it regularly. Those push notifications, which you can automate, are really a great way to do that and establish the habit. From there, you start to think about live activities as, again, that more persistent real-time event or task tracking. Push drives users to your app. Live activities should be, something that can stand on its own and give information and reduce the friction of getting that information. A great example here is if you're a quick service restaurant or something like that. Think about it in the sense of, if you're preparing my lunch, I want to know when to start walking so that I time it perfectly. You finish the preparation, I grab it, I walk away. If you send me a push notification and say your food's done, but I have a 10-minute walk, I have 10 minutes of walk that now my food's going to get cold or it's going to get a little soggy. And that's not the experience we want to create for someone. We really want to help them understand, hey, here's where we are in the process. You can help plan for you accordingly so that you get here at the right time and get the best food experience. And so that's a really important distinction between the two. Another thing I want to call out and be cautious to you all is don't send push notifications with information that's being shared via the live activity. So if I'm skiing in the example you see here on the slopes, I don't want you to send me information about, you just ran this or you just did that, or hey, this is happening. Instead, I want you to tell me like, hey, there's a problem, get off the mountain, or those really important informations that is like, hey, you need to break the experience versus interrupt the experience. And so it's nuanced, but it's a really important one. And I'll go back to the MLB, NFL. They've done really well with this. They really focus on if you're in the experience of watching a game's scores on live activities, they're not sending you the push notifications about that same game because that's just going to be disjointed and it's not going to be a good experience. They know that, and so they're really protecting against it. Okay, use discretion. This is one I have to practice in my life all the time now. My kids are getting a little bit older, but live activities are highly visible. So you don't want to put a live activity about somebody's test results or somebody's bank account information that lives on the screen. They may be sitting with their children and their children may see things. They may be riding in the subway. We really want to avoid putting that information that's more private and unique to the individual on the screen. That's where it's going to make more sense to send a push notification, as you see on the examples up here. Rather than risking that kind of information, what we really recommend is dedicate separate alerts to call attention to private info, and then think about, okay, does a live activity make sense here? If not, use the push notification. If it does, like a fitness app displaying progress towards a goal, keep it even a little generic. Don't talk about a weight goal or don't talk about length of time in a heart rate zone. Instead, use the rings or use some sort of way to be more nondescript about, hey, you're doing great, keep it up, you're achieving your goal, without giving away the information that they may not want to share with others around them. All right, best practice number 6, make your first impression count. So when users receive that first live activity, they're prompted with what you see on the right-hand side to allow future ones. Apple, again, does a really good job. They care about you as an app provider because you're creating value and utility on the phone. They care about the person holding the phone more, though. And that's just the reality we all have to accept. And so Apple is always going to put the user first. And you can see that precisely in this experience. They're giving the user the control to say, look, this live activity has started. We want to make sure you know that option is there. You have the decision, though, to allow it or not allow it, both now and in the future. And I think that's really important because that forces us as marketers, as product people, or app developers to really go, okay, what do I show in that very initial experience? You have to make sure the information presented in that experience is valuable, error-free, and provides a very obvious experience that somebody is going to want to take part in. If you're not paying off those expectations of the customer, they're going to hit don't allow. Now, they can eventually reverse this, but that requires going into settings and a lot of different types of clicks. We do not want to create friction in the process and force them down paths that have more clicks. So I really want to emphasize, think about, you see a live activity for the first time when you're doing the design of this widget. What information do you show? What is most important? And what is the customer going to get value from so that they say, yes, allow this, and then continue to use it in the future? All right. Now we're going to get into a bit more of the design side of it. So best practice 7, consider the presentation. There are 3 primary presentation types. You have what they call compact, minimal, and expanded. We're going to walk through each one of those, help you understand what should you do design-wise in them, and what are some of the different use cases for each of these experiences. So starting with compact. Compact presentation allows for small space on the left and the right side of the phone camera. Make sure you present only the most important live activity information to take advantage of this limited space. What's really important here is if you're familiar with the iPhone, they've got the new dynamic island, and then when it expands out for these live activities, it's actually a very dark background. So you want to make sure you're using consistent colors and typography to maintain the visibility in that experience, but also still staying true to your brand. We also recommend, and this comes from Apple as well, don't add the padding like you see on the left-hand side here. While it may seem like you want to space that out, Apple is really focused, and we're also recommending you want to keep it in a very narrow view of vision. This is what Apple's creating. If you look at some of their native apps like the timer and things like that, this is exactly the type of space they're using. You want to mimic that. Apple's creating these experiences and really driving people towards it. Don't try to recreate the wheel. follow the lead of Apple because that's what users are used to and expecting from you. Here's a great example from MLB again. It's easy to recognize at a glance. I apologize to those who might not be baseball fans or not in the States, but if you are a baseball fan and this is something you are following, you know what those logos are immediately. And you know what the numbers next to those logos mean. And so great example of where, they're not trying to push their logo of MLB in, but rather just giving them, hey, you said you wanted the score of the Giants-Rockies game. We're giving it to you quick and easy. Here it is. You can still navigate about your phone, jump into other apps, do all the things you would normally do. This content will continue to live on, and it's not intrusive to the experience. It's really adding value because you're saying, hey, I want that information. Help me out here. The next is the minimal. I know compact, minimal, it can get a little bit confusing, but this is really used when more than one live activity is happening at a time. A great example of this is if you're following a game, like we used in our last example, and you have a timer running. The minimal detached, what you see on the right-hand side here, that's what Apple's really most frequently using when you're using that timer app. It's easy. You see a little round circle with an arrow and you know it's counting down based on the numbers it's showing. So here again, instead of your brand logo, really think about the most up-to-date information available, even if it's abbreviated. You want your live activity as a countdown display and running clock rather than just a static image. You want something dynamic, continuously happening so that the user stays engaged with it, but also realizes what's happening. If it's just static at the top of the screen, it's probably not going to add that utility we're really looking for, and you may see a drop off over time in both the usage and the long-term adoption. Everybody talks, you're going to see it in your reviews, you're going to see it out on Reddit. Make sure you're creating that right experience and making it the best possible. Here again, all of these buttons are clickable. So remember, going back to our previous example, if you have a click, make it a deep link. We want to get them right to the right activity or the information, excuse me, and pay it off. So using the timer example, if I have multiple timers going, if I click one timer, I want it to take me to that timer versus all of my timers at once, and then me having to remember, wait, which timer did I just click? What am I looking for? It's really important to help make that a seamless experience for your users. And then finally, you've got the expanded. This is the easiest to read. It's got the most to it, but this is expanded by, if I go back here, if I click on one of these experiences, they have a long hold. That long hold is what is going to create this expanded experience that you see here. You really want to nest the content around the camera and optimize to space. It's so important that you continue that really good visual experience that Apple is known for. And so you really want to focus on, okay, how do I make sure I fit into the experience of the phone rather than sticking out like a sore thumb? Here again, make sure the proper information is included. You want to keep it brief, but focused on what are they likely looking for, and then really make sure it's in between the heights of I think it's about 3 times the camera island that we're seeing here. Don't do crazy spacing. We want to really keep it in a good compact area, and don't make it bigger than it needs to be. Again, try to make it a holistic experience that matches what is iPhone or excuse me, Apple already created on the device, and how do you become an extension of that rather than just something different. So looking at examples here, on the left-hand side, I'm going back to MLB again, guys, I'm really sorry, but you can see the compact version. When you click and hold on that, the right-hand side is giving you that expanded version. It's just cleaner, it's got more information, you're able to put what runners are on base, what is the count, how many outs are there, what inning are they in. You have a lot more space, you can do a lot more with it, but you can see it continues to look like it's part of the experience, it's seamless flow, rather than this really disjointed experience that you could create. Design number 2, best practice number 8, dark and light modes. So Apple systems default to a light background or a dark background based on the user. We need to take that into account. Live activities are smart enough to really understand, okay, what mode is this phone in? And now I'm going to match the code base to that particular experience. And so if they're in dark mode, make sure you have a dark mode. If they're in light mode, make sure you have a light mode. You really want to make sure that it's blending into that experience. And so if you have custom colored backgrounds, make sure that in light and dark mode, they really blend in accordingly. If you have specific text or content in there, make sure that content is seen as part of the experience rather than just like crazy bright. Think about, if you're looking at a phone at night because you have it in dark mode, and all of a sudden there's this ridiculously bright background there. That's not going to be a good user experience. Maybe you're dealing with babies, maybe you're dealing with something sensitive in the evenings. You're not going to want to use that type of experience. And so while it may sound small, it's really important to make sure you're matching the expectations of your users and your customers and giving them the experience they want. All right, jumping ahead, this is our last one, and then we will open it up for questions to the group. So best practice number 9, use live activities as part of your omnichannel strategy. Live activities is a single channel. There are a lot of different ways you can communicate with your users or your customers. You've got push, you've got in-app, you've got email, you've got SMS, you've got live activities, you've got the web. All of them have a place in the communication strategy and customer engagement strategy you have built. Make sure you make live activities part of that strategy. It should not be this independent standalone thought that's like, hey, that's really cool, let's go do that. It is really cool, but it needs to be part of that experience that fits the holistic experience, holistic customer lifecycle that you're building. And so really take the time to think about, what does a user want to get from me in this experience? When does it make sense for me to use a live activity versus a push notification? When does it make sense for me to go, okay, wait a second, I need to give them some typical or different experience altogether because it's sensitive information. And so really hone in on, what does this do and why am I doing it? If there's not that value exchange, you're going to see some issues. And I really want you guys to avoid issues, so focus on that particular piece. We have to give a quick plug. OneSignal does have pre-built tools to add live activities to your iOS device. And so if this is something you're interested in, we're always welcome to talk to you about it. Even if you don't use us, feel free to check out the documentation. A lot of these best practices are already listed in there as well to help you find the right path forward. All right, so wrapping it up, just a quick summary. Choose the use cases clearly defined, start and end dates. It needs to make sense. It can be a delivery, it can be a live event, it can be a game. Make sure whatever you're creating, it has a start and end date within those 8 hours. Avoid promos and ads. If everybody knows you're sponsored by somebody, it's okay to include it. But do not go add ads just for the sake of adding ads and creating revenue streams. We all want to make money, we're all for profit, but at the end of the day, that's going to deteriorate the customer experience. And it'll actually eat up battery too. You don't want to be known for eating up battery and creating that bad experience. Know when to use live activities versus push notifications. Again, is it something sensitive? Is it something urgent? Push notification. Is it something that's ongoing and continuing updates? Probably better for a live activity. Use discretion. Don't give out information people don't want to share. Make your first impression count. Really create a holistic thought process around, what is the value of this? What does somebody see right as they get in? And how do I make sure they're happy with that and ultimately getting something from it? Consider presentation. There's compact, minimal, and expanded. You want to make sure you're building to all of these. And again, when you click on that deep link, get to the right information and make sure that people are feeling satisfied with where they're taken rather than this disjointed experience. Design for light and dark modes. Color matters, and the design and look and appearance of it do matter on the phone as well. Use part of an omnichannel strategy. Again, I can't stress this enough. It is so important that this fits into your bigger picture. It is not a one-off, I just did it because I thought it was interesting. It needs to be part of that strategy so that users find value in it. All right. With that, I will leave it to questions. And so I think we are going to jump over to those questions now. Let's see. Sorry, I got to scroll. All right, first question. What's the level of effort needed to implement live activities? T-shirt sizing, I would say it's somewhere between a medium and small, depending on your organization. You're responsible for creating the widget itself. So what does that actually display on the phone? So that falls to you, and that's on you to make the design there. The other piece that a lot of people don't think about, but is really important, is the data stream. You need a data stream of content that's not rapidly, but is updating to ensure that something changes on that live activity and somebody is getting the utility and the value from it. And so that is something you can look at and really think about, okay, what data do I have? What data should I use to be able to get that to work properly? Okay, sounds like this is the last question we have time for. What are some key indicators that can help you know if you should be using live activities with your app? Great question. So what I like to think about is if somebody's coming into your app repeatedly in a small period of time, going to the same page or the same content over and over again, constantly refreshing it, that could be a good use case for a live activity. And so I use the food prep example again. If I ordered food and I'm constantly dragging down, trying to understand where am I in the process, that could be a really good live activity. It's going to add utility, it's going to make it easier for me, and it's going to let me plan to get a better meal. So I would really say, think about how frequently is somebody coming into a particular page. If you're seeing it in rapid succession, and that's far beyond what you're used to seeing throughout the rest of your app, then that's an experience that probably could be a live activity. If it's a very specific event, meaning, whether that's the match, game, whatever, or the live activity, the live event for a game, that's also a really important one, because if you can create more gamification for somebody by them seeing, hey, I'm falling on the leaderboard because I'm not playing as much, you're gonna get them in playing more. And that's really good for you, and that's really good for the player because they want to be competitive. And so make sure it fits into that, like, what is somebody looking for? What is somebody trying to achieve? And then you're going to have a good experience with it. Okay, I'm being told we are at time. So with that, I want to thank everybody for taking the time today. I really appreciate you listening. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to either your representative at OneSignal, or feel free to reach out to me as well, Jay Hollander, that's just my last name, at onesignal.com. Happy to answer questions, help you guys out, jump on calls. We're always looking to talk about this. If you have creative ideas you want to run by us, feel free to do that as well. But really appreciate everybody's time today. I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday, and look for your live activities soon.